Hello, it's Sander Wood, and today I'm going to be talking about how to play Dungeons & Dragons. In Dungeons & Dragons, you need a minimum of 2 people. One of them assumes the role of Dungeon Master, or DM. The DM creates the world. He is in charge of creating the drama, the adventure, the violence, the horror, the fantasy, the intrigue, the politics, the world, making it live and breathe and be as credible as he possibly can in that role. The Game Master will give you details and describe things to engage all 5 senses. You can feel how the warm spring rain feels against your skin, or hear the sounds of deer just outside of your campfire light. The way the moonlight looks as it shines down through a cove of trees, and the way the lizard man's barbed javelin feels as it impales in your guts, describing these anguishes, and in dealing also with the combat of the game, with the conflict of the game, and making sure there is progress and adventure and story and something that is happening on the stage. Now, on that stage are the stars. Now, while the Game Master handles some of the co-stars and essentially all of the minor roles, assuming and playing many different people within the confines of this game, known as non-player characters. The players themselves assume roles which they craft. These roles are very similar in many cases to that of Lord of the Rings, in that you're playing elven warriors with steel swords and bows, or dwarfs with axes, wizards hurling strange incantations, or men praying to long-lost gods. All of these and many more concepts are available within Dungeons & Dragons. Now, there are many editions of the game, and all of them have their strengths and weaknesses. However, to play the game, you need a minimum of 3 books. Now, these books will look different depending on which edition of the game you decide to play. This is called the Player's Handbook. It is the quintessential book and the most important book in Dungeons & Dragons. Without this, you cannot play the game. Each player should have a copy of this, or within the confines of a group, you should have at least 1 extra copy. The Player's Handbook provides all the details you need to create your character. It will describe what differences there are between an elf and a dwarf and how to role play them, how to choose between a fighter and a paladin, or a druid and a sorcerer, and explaining what abilities a rogue has. It will outline your skills, your additional powers, and what spells do. There's a great deal of information in your Player's Handbook, which varies from edition to edition. You will also need a copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide. The Dungeon Master's Guide explains how a Game Master will come and craft his story, the adventure, the quest that the players are on, how he can handle multiple roles, having to play often over 100 different roles in the course of a night, and how to create NPCs, the non-player characters, to populate the world, how to make them believable and credible and not two-dimensional cardboard characters. It describes what sort of treasure may await your players, as well as magical items. This book is also one the Dungeon Master needs to have. Now, this is perhaps the least necessary of these books, as there are many monster manuals for essentially all of the editions, and other monster manuals could be used in place of this. However, you will not have the standard basic normal monsters without this book, or whatever version of it is within your edition. The Monster Manual 1, as it's often called, houses the familiar creatures like ogres and kobolds and goblins and trolls. These are the stock and trade of a Game Master, and essentially early on in a Game Master's career, these are great creatures to draw strength into your story from. Now, you can create your own stories, or you can purchase pre-made stories, like this Forgotten Realms story. Sons of Grunge. It's a level 4, which means your characters have to be 4th level to play this. And characters start off at 1st level and can go, well, within the confines of these rules, up to 20th. This means you acquire experience points as you do things throughout the game, and you advance in levels. You get stronger, and you acquire additional abilities from that strength of character. So, we can see the progress from humble peasant to world scorching wizard in the progress of the game. The game also requires dice, poly-sided dice. Some of these you will not necessarily be familiar with. This is a 6-sided die. You all have these in your house. They are in your Monopoly game. They are in your Risk game. You can pull those out and use them, and they will work just fine. You also need a 4-sided die. This you might not have seen. An 8-sided die, a 10-sided die, a 12-sided die, and a 20-sided die. You will need at least one of each of these die. However, it may be much more expedient to have multiples of each die for various reasons within your group. Besides that, you will need something to write with. There are numerous non-player characters' names, the names of towns and cities and such that you need to take notes of, so you know what to call them the next time you encounter them. And with that in mind, you need something to write on. There are also character sheets that you can print out. However, you can use a blank piece of paper just as well and write the information down on that. So what a role-playing game is a game in which you take on the role of some fantasy creature or idea that is interesting to you, and you walk around inside the game master's head for a little while and escape into this fantasy for an enjoyable few hours. So that is what Dungeons & Dragons is. Thank you for watching.